Yeah, this is where we get into the fun, really geeky level of insider baseball that I know you love. But essentially what it is, we have HB 316, which called for there being an audit statewide. The decision was made internally months ago. You would have something called a risk limiting audit. Now, in doing that, you have to make a few decisions. You have to decide what it's going to be, and the rules around that decide for the ones that's the easiest in terms of efficacy to achieve. That's one of the parts of the rules, but there are many other things that feed into it. So I'm not going to presuppose what the secretary may or may not choose.
Okay, Gabe, let's look at HB 316. In HB 316, it says that to complete a pre-certification audit as provided in Code Section 21-2-498, that's OCGA, Official Code of Georgia. So let's take a look at OCGA 21-2-498, specifically subsection B. The last sentence reads, audits performed under this code section shall be conducted by manual inspection of random samples of the paper official ballots. Last time I checked, selecting the race is not a random sample.
We'll then move to the risk limiting audit, or RLA. At 1 p.m. today, I will make the official designation of which race will be the subject of the RLA. At that time, I will designate that the RLA will be the presidential race. With the margin being so close, it will require a full by-hand recount in each county. This will help build confidence. It will be an audit, a recount, and a recanvass all at once.
Functionally, at the county level, they have these things called ballot manifests. So they know how many ballots they have to do. Wait a second, am I doing RLA or recount? I just realized this.
We can take both, but
I'll go through RLA first because that's the next step. So we have the ballot manifests. We roll 20 10-sided dice, like from Dungeons and Dragons, and you get random numbers, and you put those into the Arlo software. And those will give you a randomized version after you put in all the ballot manifests. And the computer will basically say, in Spalding County, you pull 1 ballot from batch 3. In Fulton County, you pull 2 ballots from batch 77. In Dougherty County, you pull 1 ballot from batch 17, around the state until you get to the scientific number that says, once you run these things through and a human being reads these, they write them down on a card, they put their results back into the Arlo system, it will give you a percentage of confidence that the outcome is correct. So that's how that works. And if it doesn't get to that percentage of confidence, you do it all again to get another round of ballots. And you keep on adding to it and adding to it until you get to that confidence level.
Your state instituted an RLA on a presidential race specifically?
I don't really know, and we do what we do in Georgia. We follow our laws.
Now, a recount is something that is similar but very different. And there's rules around that as well that was defined by the state election board. Every county would have to get their ballots prepared. We did do the investment to provide a high-speed, high-capacity scanner for every single county, regardless of size. Big counties have multiples of these. And what they're going to do is they will create, I misspoke slightly the other day, they will not be taking actual live ballots. They will create a test deck that they know the outcome from it. They will go on a BMD and vote, and they will do some hand mark and vote to say, we're going to make it 42 for the president, 58 for Joe Biden, or 56 for Joe Biden, and 2 for, Jorgensen. They run that through the scanner to say that's the outcome we expected. Then you clear those votes off because the scanner is operating properly. Then you take all the ballots, regardless of where they came from, be they the absentee in person, which is the early vote, the absentee, which is the hand marked, or the BMD on election day, which is the traditional ballot we'd be seeing. And they get all put through those central scanners to get you a final count. And the intent is obviously that count will be very, very similar to the other one. But let me caution everybody, it's going to be a little bit different. It always is in every recount in the history of mankind. It's always a little bit different. Machines look at things slightly differently. Sometimes the reflection might be a little off, but fundamentally it will not be off. But it's always going to be a little bit different. That is not suspicious. That is normal. Okay?
We follow the process, and we understand the significance of this for not just Georgia, but for every single American. At the end of the day, when we do a hand count, then we can answer the question exactly what was the final margin in this race.
Another thing about this is all those ballots that were adjudicated with ambiguous marks or overvotes, They get adjudicated again. So you have a different panel of human beings looking to make those decisions. So that's another reason that could be affected. Every one of these processes involves people. The least reliable part of all these processes is people, because we are all fundamentally flawed. We will all make mistakes. And I guarantee you, if I get a deck of 1,000 votes and I give it to people to count, it will come up with a different thing every time. If I give it to a computer to count, 99% of the time, it's going to come out with the same outcome. That's just the way human beings are built. And we all have to kind of accept that. And again, it doesn't mean there's skullduggery going on. It means humans are going to be humans. And we all got to know that at the end of the day.
Won't a hand recount be less accurate than a computer recount? I mean, humans make mistakes, and are you concerned about accuracy of a hand recount?
It really is what the numbers take us to, and we're following the process that would drive us to that, that's in current state law.
And the one thing we got to realize is that illegal voting is going to happen. It's a minor part of this thing, and we're putting every safeguard we can get to make sure it doesn't happen now or in the future. But again, that whole thing about human beings being flawed, guess what? That's going to happen. And we're trying to do everything we can. The electronic part of this thing, the software, the scanners, all that stuff worked exactly well. The only point where we have some issues occasionally is where human beings have to interact with it. And we have literally 159 counties, 2,419 polling locations, 330 early voting polling locations, staffed by tens of thousands of poll workers that had, between all the systems, nearly 5 million Georgians casting votes. Guess what? Mistakes will be made. That's going to happen. You have to be realistic about that. And yes, there's a highlight on this now because of just the sheer tightness of our race.
For more than a year that we should absolutely trust the QR code, so why is a hand recount necessary right now?
Statistically, because of where we are there, we have a team of people, national experts that have worked on risk limiting audits in several other states. They're part of our team. This is not just a decision we made unilaterally. We reached out to these experts. We've been working with them for several months, and we just follow the science of a risk limiting audit. We follow the numbers, and that's where it leads us to count every single ballot by hand.
Have you seen any evidence at all to back up any of these claims of fraud?
Again, fraud is a very large, vague kind of thing. The one thing I do know is there's evidence of illegal votes. And that's a very binary thing. Fraud is this emotionally fraught word. And let me just say this, for the people out there who are as irritated with people talking about voter fraud right now, they should be equally irritated with people who are talking about voter suppression 2 years ago. Both undermine confidence in the system. Both were false then. Both are false now. And I'm telling you that because that is the truth.
Recount set a precedent for every close race going forward in Georgia from now.
No, we can pick whatever one we put, but we understand the national significance of this session right now. Next time it may be some other statewide race. In fact, as we roll this out, you have to understand, many states that are doing risk limiting audit, it took them 5 to 7 years to get this going. When Colorado did it, that was a long, multi-year process. We have passed House Bill HB 316 in 2019. We stood up, in spite of COVID, a risk limiting audit this year. And so in 9 months, 11 months, we're going to do the first statewide election with a risk limiting audit. So this is record time that we've done this. We're actually eventually going to be doing risk limiting audits for a host of elections to give you, the voter, confidence that when you've cast your ballot, it was accurately counted, that you have the confidence, and you can leave at the end of the day knowing the system, got it right. And then when we do that, we think it really is good for all of the Georgia.
Are you doing this full recount because the Trump campaign asked you to?
No, we're doing this because it is really what makes the most sense. With the national significance of this race and the closeness of this race, we have to run a statewide audit. This is the race that makes the most sense. Logically, as I worked with our team, this is really what made the most sense, and we'll be following the process on that.
We're now learning that the Trump campaign has officially asked for a recount here in our state. Remember, this is a Republican Secretary of State who's feeling the pressure from his own party. Standing by their president, 8 current and elected Georgia Republican members of the U.S. House urged Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to investigate fraud claims before certifying results. Meanwhile, Raffensperger is about to launch a historic audit of elections in all 159 Georgia counties. They will review batches of paper ballots to ensure with 90% confidence that the results are accurate.
Don't hurt yourself too much patting yourself on the back there, Brad. Let's go back to HB 316. They wrote in a clause that stated that the Secretary of State wouldn't have to conduct a risk limiting audit until December 31st, 2021. Yeah, after the presidential election.
Well, it is actually an audit. It's all in one. It's an audit, recanvass, and a recount all in one because it'll be just really a process that gets it all.
I wouldn't necessarily say that there was mayhem. There's processing. And in this state, it's very different than in other states. We do not send out unsolicited ballots. You have to make a request online with your driver's license. You have to send in a request in with your signature. So we have a first stop point on that. The second stop point is then it has to be signature matched again at the back end. So in this state, we know there's going to be some issues with this, but we did not see any widespread issues with the absentee balloting process. And for the vast majority of the voters in this state, they voted in person on a BMD.
Trying to understand how hundreds of human beings working long hours are going to be more accurate than
Well, that's why there'll be plenty of eyeballs on them to verify that every vote is accurately counted. And that's the way the process works because of the large number of votes and the closeness of the vote. It's the only way to do that. We've talked to our risk limiting experts in our office and also national experts in that. We're following the process.
We are very confident. We never had a recount, so we don't know what will happen yet, especially with this much paper that is hand marked.
And is it reasonable to believe that the results will change much? 14,000 votes. Is there any chance that the outcome or the results of the presidential election would change as a result? Is it possible that 14,000 votes could flip?
You asked me to make predictions, and what we're going to deal is in facts. And so I'll report the facts.
We're talking about probabilities. What is the probability?
I'll get up my calculator and I'll get that back to you. I can't do that off the cuff.
Can the Trump campaign still ask for a recount once this is done and you folks have certified like the system used to, or is this count as their one recount, if you would?
That's a good question, but after it is certified, the candidate that is within 0.5%, I believe, would still be entitled to a recount, but that would be a scanned recount just because of that is what is in state law.
Cobb County's outgoing commission chair, a Republican, is speaking out against those in his party who aren't ready to accept the election results.
I find it extraordinary that 4 years ago nobody complained about the results of the election, and yet 4 years later we have people who question the integrity of the voting process because they lost. That doesn't reflect well of leadership.
And that's coming from a Republican who just lost his seat to a Democrat. Secretary Raffensperger will hold a news conference later this morning here at the state capitol to explain the audit and answer any other questions. We will have updates for you throughout the day.
I don't mind Brad calling it a recount, but it clearly doesn't meet the requirements for a risk-limiting audit. Let's look and see what verified voting says about it. Georgia audit laws, audit comprehensiveness. The audit should be conducted by manual inspection of random samples of the paper official ballots. Sound familiar? Transparency. Local election superintendents shall conduct each audit in public view and provide details of the audit to the public within 48 hours of completion. Audit counting method. The audit is conducted using a hand count only. Audits are conducted by manual inspection of random samples of the paper official ballots. Ballot protection. The chain of custody for each ballot shall be maintained at all times during the audit. And look here under resources. We have Georgia State Election Board Rule 183-1-15-.04. We'll get to that. And last but not least, Georgia Code 21-2-498. Remember that one? Just over 2 months ago, the State Election Board passed Rule number 183-1-15-.04, and they stuck that rule at the end of a very, very long day's agenda, almost as if they didn't want anyone to hear about it. The rule has two parts: preparing for the audit, conducting the audit. And the only problem I have with the code is that it directly conflicts with OCGA 21-2-498, as well as the opinions of all experts on risk-limiting audits, and they don't seem to have a very good grasp of it just yet.
I have a question. This is Mr. Worley. I have a question for Mr. Germany. Looking at the rule, the first part of the rule, Section 1, preparing for the audit, Item 1 says, following November general elections in even-numbered years, Each county shall participate in a statewide risk limiting audit with a risk limit of not greater than 10% as set forth in this rule. Can you explain how the 10% works?
So the 10%, what that means is basically the audit is supposed to confirm the result of the election to a 90% confidence interval. I think that's the right term. And that's basically what other states use that do this. What that really does, it sets a minimum, it sets a, let's see, I'm doing the right way. In a lot of our pilot audits, the goal is you got to have at least a 90%, confidence interval. At the end of it, the confidence interval might be much higher, which is good. It can't be lower. If it's lower, then you have to keep counting. So really what that sets is how many ballots are we going to have to count to try to reach that result. And that depends on the closeness of the race and other factors. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think it does. Thank you.
In case you were wondering, that answer was just given by attorney Ryan Germany, the principal architect of HB 316 himself. Now, I understand that a full manual count is an RLA with a risk limit of 0, and you could twist things around to say that this is a random sample where the probability of sampling each ballot is 100%. But I think you'd be missing the true intent of a risk-limiting audit. There should be RLAs of all contests, not just the presidential race. And in case you didn't know it, there are 2 Senate races in Georgia this year that are pretty damn important. Don't let the spectacle of a statewide hand recount for the president race distract you from the fact that there isn't any other risk-limiting audits being conducted on any of the other important races in Georgia. In case you're wondering why they stuck that new state election board rule at the end of the agenda, it's because they were pulling a fast one. Sleight of hand, as it were. They get away with it because it's legal, but not because it's right. They slipped this into the rule. Only one contest is selected for audit, and the rule gives the Secretary of State discretion over which contest is selected. Yeah. So that's SEB Rule 183-1-15-.04, and you should try to hide it because it's shameful. Don't be talking to me about random samples and risk-limiting audits when out of hundreds of races, you're only checking one.